started. So for those that don't know me, my name is Marjorie Abdelkreem. I'm a PreSales Collective ambassador, and I also work for AWS. I'm actually moving into customer success function. So moving a little bit away from pre-sales, but not too far, because that's where my heart is. I love the pre-sales role. But super excited to have all of you here joining us for this really great conversation that we've got lined up for you. But just a little bit about, pre-sales collective, what we do, and who we are. So pre-sales collective is a global community. For those of you that are part of it, super excited to have you on this call. If you're not, join the pre-sales collective site, join the Slack channel. There are 20,000 members as part of this community, and that number is just mind-boggling to think about it. And it's a global community where we come together and we learn from one another and help each other grow in our careers, learn from each other, and also develop new skills if that's what we're seeking. And also for those that are just starting, it's a great place for all of you to learn from also newcomers as well as seasoned professionals and leaders in the industry about what it means to be a pre-sales professional and why all of us are so passionate about it. So hopefully you all are taking advantage of some of that. But before we go ahead and go to the meat of today, I want to know a little bit about you. So if you all, we're going to launch here a brief survey or poll, and if you can tell me what role best describes you. Are you an SE, SA, a manager? Are you just thinking about pre-sales and you're curious, or you're an AE or in sales leadership or any other function? Please do let us know. We're interested in understanding who the members are that are joining these calls, and what can we do to make sure that we're most benefiting you in the conversation. And again, just to set the stage for those that are just chiming in, please do leverage the chat function, dialogue with one another, dialogue with us, as well as the Q&A. We'll monitor that to make sure that we are addressing any of your questions. But before I ask our panelists to introduce themselves, this is a pretty special topic, and it's important to me because as I think about SEs and SAs, whatever title we use these days, there's so many of them, they're often viewed as a tactical extension of the sales organization. And it prevents us from being, viewed as a strategic partner, one that really helps set the bar fairly high for our customers and our company in terms of what we're actually looking to deliver, what is the solution that we're proposing, and how can we help that entire life cycle. And we're starting to see some change actually these days where the technical sales professional, the SE, the SA, is now starting to drive a much more elongated conversation in terms of how they're engaging the customer in the customer journey and their life cycle. And it's becoming a much more critical point in terms of our engagement with these team members. So that's part of the conversation that we're going to have today. We're going to hear from our panelists on, how they view their team members, how they're able to rise above that tactical notion that maybe some folks are bucketizing us in, and really provide you all with some action items, some next steps on how to help your team also elevate themselves within their organization. So with that, I'm going to ask my panelists to please introduce themselves, and I'm going to actually stop sharing because I'm obviously not good with slides. So it's a distraction here, and we're going to stop the sharing so y'all can see my panelists here. But I'd love for my panelists to introduce themselves and share a little bit about who they are. I'll go kind of in order just so that we can make sure that we're capturing everyone. But Adir, can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, nice to meet you all. I'm Adir. I run everything that is go-to-market for Walnut and one of the founding members. So it's great to be here.
Welcome. Super excited to have you. Tina, can you please introduce yourself? We lost Tina. Oh no. All right, go for it. I'll come back to Tina when she comes back on.
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Gokul. I lead the solution engineering team here at Catalan. We're a test automation startup. All things all, I've been in pre-sales for some time, so we're really excited to talk to everyone here.
Awesome. Welcome, Gokul. Super excited to have you join us. And Tina, I know Tina for some time. I think you and I think we did like one of our very first webinars together. It was like 2 years ago, right?
We did. We did. It was, I think it was right around May the 4th too, because I remember having Star Wars.
Yes.
Right? May the 4th be with everybody out there. So hello, folks. I'm Tina Phillips. I am a business consultant director at ADP, which is what we term our pre-sales consultants. So they're called business consultants at ADP. And I have our enterprise consultants in the Midwest states. So like think of the corridor that runs from Minnesota on down south through the states. And those people are part of the people that I get to lead. So I have an incredibly strong group of consultants, but I also get to work with other pre-sales leaders in our organization around how we're setting our pre-sales strategy, what our go-to-market looks like, and even sometimes what our demo strategy looks like, right, across the board, whether it's small business all the way up through enterprise business. And I've been in pre-sales for just 10 short years.
10 short years. Oh my gosh. I don't even want to think about how long you've been in these roles, but welcome to all of you, and super excited to have this conversation with you. As we think about the pre-sales role, and I think each one of you, as we were chatting about this session, you all have struggled with this, right? The whole notion of pre-sales getting boxed into these tactical activities. I'm curious to hear from you, Gokul. Why do you think we're getting boxed into these categories from your standpoint?
Yeah, and I think it's about perception, right? And you think when you start doing things that are tactical in nature, you give a perception to the overall audience that that's what you do, right? And naturally, people tend to assume that that's what you're capable of, right? And maybe you can only do demos, or you can only go into technical conversations, or you can only go into POCs, right? And I think that's the real important word, is perception, right? I think the way we set things up for ourselves and our career is really important, and the way others look at us. So I think that's one of the main reasons pre-sales gets put into a tactical box, if you will.
Yeah. That's so interesting. And Adir, you have such a unique role, right? I'm curious to hear from you what your thoughts are on this.
Yes, so I think from the relationship we have within our organizations is that SE, solution engineers, at the end of the day, they don't do like favors, right? They have their KPIs. And oftentimes you see in a lot of organizations that, oh, I'm not sure what to do here. Just reach out to Ian, our head of solution engineering. He'll help you, right? And when you do those quote unquote favors, you're being considered as the handyman, and like, oh, that's fine. He's going to do that and he's going to do that. So I think, especially with our organization, but that's when I talk with a lot of other organizations, SE has a very important role, and he can help a lot with very specific things. And when he's doing favors across the board, he doesn't have time. They don't have time to actually perform and achieve the KPIs, the needed KPIs. So that's how I view it.
And you might be saying yes to everything, right? And I think that's also an important point here is that, if someone asks you, hey, can you do a demo? I jump into a demo, or I do a POC, not even asking a question or thinking about why we are doing that is really important, right? I think just asking those questions is important.
And I think that's, just the nature of people who tend to gravitate to this role, right? They're very much in the servant leadership type of mindset. They want to make sure that they're providing the customer and the account teams with the best resources possible to make sure that they're helping accelerate that. But, it's a fine balance that I think we need to figure out. And Tina, I'm curious, how are you helping, change that perception and fight it from sales teams who really just view them either as a sales partner or, the statement of the resource or the toolkit, the tool in my tool. It drives me crazy when people say the tool in my toolkit. How are you fighting that?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, right? So as I was thinking through this, one of the things that salespeople are phenomenal at is getting people to say yes, right? Like it is their job, get people to say yes. And so when they reach out to us and they're like, hey, can you just do this? Hey, can you just do that? Not only are they really good at getting us to say, yes, we want to serve. And so we're like, yes, I can do that. And then all of a sudden you're putting a PowerPoint deck together, or you're not only putting a PowerPoint deck together, you're making sure that the page numbers on the bottom of that deck are correct, or that there's not misspellings, or that the branding is appropriate, which just essentially isn't our job. And whenever we do say yes to that, and whenever we do step into that, it's putting us into that support role. So my first piece of advice to my team and everybody out there is, and it sounds kind of trite, but like, just stop doing it. Stop saying yes. And if your sales partner is asking you to step into what might be a tactical piece of work or an administrative piece of work, professionally figure out how to steer them in the right direction, right? Like maybe it's back to their sales leader, maybe it's back to their administrative support, but professionally steer them back. And my second piece is to act like a partner. So oftentimes we're like, oh gosh, the salesperson said this, I better do it. Well, you're a partner, you're not lower than, you're not above, you're a partner. So figure out how to partner on the deal versus take direction on the deal or give direction on the deal. Figure out how to work together as a team.
I think that's huge, Tina, especially, as we're starting to see more SEs becoming kind of the check on an opportunity. I don't know if you all are doing this, but, I've worked at several companies where people go back to the SE and they're like, so is that deal really coming in? And they're afraid to say whether or not the deal is coming in or not. And demonstrating that partnership and the willingness to challenge your rep that you're partnering with, I think is the first step as well, right? Demonstrating that I have a voice and opinion on the process and how this is going to succeed, I think is extremely important. And I know many SEs who will be like, nope, I'm not doing it. I'm not going to do it. But I challenge each one of you to change that mindset, right? And think about what Tina was just saying around the partnership. That partnership doesn't just happen without trust. And if you all don't trust each other, then your opinion will never be valued, right? Adir, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I think there are a few things. First of all, I agree. And by the way, Tina, as someone who's been doing sales for many years, like I can confirm or deny the fact that we can have people do things. That's, we're still thinking about it. But I think another part of this is like, if you look, SEs are an important part of the sales funnel, right? They have a very important stage of the sales funnel. And the ability to kind of change this mindset is, how can I impact the steps that are before me? How can I impact what SDRs and BDRs are showing? How can I impact what the AE is showing? And actually have some very clear definitions on what's an actual qualified lead, what's a lead that I actually need to work on, and effectively being part of the overall forecasting of those kind of things, right? So I think that's the place that we can change perception of an SE role from a tactical point of view to a more strategic point of view.
Yeah. And on that note of becoming more strategic, Gokul, I'm curious to hear from you. What are your thoughts on how to get an SE who's an individual contributor to become more strategic?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, right? I think there are a lot of things that you can do, especially being in this sales engineering role. You talk to a lot of the product teams, support teams, customer success, name it, right? Every single team across the company you talk to. And I think to that point, turning our experience on product to power, right? Being that communication engine between your product teams and customers, and talking about the roadmap, what's the future going to look like? How are we going to impact that? Is there a specific scenario that's not being accomplished today that we could accomplish in the future? Kind of having those strategic conversations, which the sales reps may not be aware of, and being able to bring in your expertise into that conversation is really important. And then I think knowing your product to an extent is critical, right? And I think being informed about what your product does and how your product can help, but more importantly, why should they buy your product, and what's the value that they get from using that product longer term. And then just learning your domain knowledge and being aware of the ecosystem within your domain to establish yourself as a trusted advisor, because people don't want to talk to people who don't know the topic or the ecosystem that you're selling into, right? And they want to understand whether you have the domain expertise, and establishing yourself as a credible person with a lot of experience is also equally important during those initial conversations with customers. Those are all things that I think help us be more strategic.
So you're saying demonstrate value first to your customer, and that will immediately help elevate your
Absolutely.
strategic position. I think that's fantastic advice. And I think, all SEs, I think we all strive to have that technical prowess and know our products inside and out, but demonstrating that back to the customer is a super powerful statement. Tina, what are you doing? What are you seeing with your teams?
Yeah, so we encourage everyone to read and read and read a lot, right? So I've got books behind me, you can't see them, but things like read the 6 Habits of Highly Effective Sales Engineers, right? Especially if you're a new sales engineer, read things like buying is hard, or selling is hard, buying is harder. Just read and become educated about things like the buying process. I agree, being a master of your domain, understanding the industry in which you are working and building that credibility with your external market's important.
Did we lose Tina?
I always think having.
Hopefully she can join us again. We'll I guess move on to the next question here. But one of the big questions that I like to ask is why do we care, and why should we even be considering this? And Adir, I'm curious as to your thoughts from a sales leader perspective. Why should the pre-sales team care to be more strategic? What if, and I've had some SEs say this to me, they're like, I don't really care. Like, I just want to be able to do, my job, and I want to get in, I want to get out. I don't care how the sales rep treats me. It's all good. Well, what are your thoughts? Why should we care?
Well, I wanna look at it from like the opposite way, right? Let's talk about the different tactical positions you have within an organization, on the sales organization, right? You look at sales ops, you look at CS ops, all those great stuff, right? They're very like tactical. They're very operational, right? They're not looking fully on the strategic picture. They're actually acting on what they need to do, which is great. And it's one thing, but I think the way that solution engineer, and the reason solution engineers need to care about those kind of things is because at the end of the day, and I think both Tina and Gokul mentioned this, they actually help the organization and the product become a better organization and a better product, right? And if you look at it from a buyer's perspective, when I'm a buyer and I want to go and buy a product, I usually wouldn't trust my AE. I usually wouldn't trust my seller. I usually would trust my solution engineer or the solution engineer that is in front of me. And if I can't establish this dominance within the call and this mutual respect with the AE, I wouldn't be able to hit my KPIs, hit my numbers. So you shouldn't care if you don't want to care, but if you actually want to look at the role and make it successful, you need to look at it from that aspect. You can still do tactical stuff and be a great operator, but it will help you elevate what you do if you can establish this relationship with your AE.
Yeah, it's interesting. Francisco here puts us in the chat. He says he had an interesting conversation with an angel investor that actually sees pre-sales taking over more of the sales function. And it's because buyers are looking for more of that strategic advisor and that strategic conversation. And it's interesting. We're starting to see some of that as well. Like when you look at specialist teams or these overlay teams, the SE is starting to take on more responsibility in some organizations. I'm curious, Gokul, what are your thoughts on this topic?
I think it's about micro versus macro, right? I think a lot of times as SEs, we focus on the bits and bytes while talking about technical stuff. And it's important to focus on macro and why it would be important for a customer's business to buy our products and see value from it. Overall, I think those are the key important things. Again, if you're a person who doesn't want to do it and doesn't want to be in the main picture and talk about the value and the overall strategy and all of that, it's completely fine. But I just think that you would be still seen as a resource, as a support resource versus a strategic resource.
Yeah. And such great points around just the strategic nature. I find it interesting how both of you are like, if they don't want to be strategic, it's fine. I would challenge that slightly. I think it's a strategic role and it needs to be elevated. And if that's not the path that you want to take, maybe looking at parallel roles, right, is kind of the way that people should be looking at, and moving into those functions, which is 100% okay. I'm curious, as we think about, and this actually came in as a question as well in the Q&A from I'm going to completely butcher this name, so I'm really sorry. Ginevra asks this question. And, it's around the metrics, and what KPIs should we be focusing on, both individually, for the SE or as a team, to help move past this tactical throughput and thought mindset. Tina, I know that you're not going to join us on video, but you have audio, you're back with us. Well, what are your thoughts on that? Oh, I guess she's back. Okay, there she is. Okay.
I just verified with my husband too. I guess we're having some internet issues in the Phillips household.
It's always when you need it. It's always when you need it. It's all good. But did you hear the question, or do you want me to repeat it?
I didn't. Nope, go ahead.
So I was asking, this also came from one of the attendees, was a question around metrics and really what it was important to track, and both for the individual as well as the team, to kind of help people move past this tactical mindset. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. So ADP is all about big data, and we track so many metrics. I think sometimes in pre-sales that it can get a little unnerving. But I will say the ones that we do obviously look at are things like our win rates. We'll look at our case assignments to measure the quantity of deals that we're working, and we'll look at our pipeline to measure the complexity of deals. But those are telling me a story as a leader about how I manage workload. A couple of my favorite metrics, though, to look at in terms of elevating away from the tactical is comparing our win rates when a pre-sales consultant is assigned versus our win rates when one is not, which can tell you, especially obviously those win rates are going to be higher, but it can tell you the volume with which your consultants are helping to bring revenue into your organization. So that's a big one. And then I also look at, for my own team, we call it an attach rate, but I like to look at how much revenue my team is attached to that's come in my region overall. And we're usually right around a 60% attach rate, because some of our deals will just sell themselves and they don't need a consultant. So if we're in that 50 to 60% range, it's always really good. If it drops below that, that's an indicator to me that something's amiss and I need to further investigate. So is it that we're not in the right deals? Is it that there's a problem with our partnership that we need to fix? So it's always an indicator that I use to look at what might be causing the problem.
Are your SEs aligned directly with an AE, or are you in a pooled model? I'm curious.
We're in a pooled model. So
okay.
It's probably like about a 1-to-3, 1-to-4 ratio.
Got it. Okay, that's helpful. And that helps with the context, because I think it's a little different when you're aligned 1-to-1, AE to SE, to attach, measure the attach rate and how often they're requesting a team member. Adir, I'm curious your thoughts on this. What are you looking at from a measurement perspective?
Yeah, so the only thing I could add on Tina here, which I think win rate is great and it's critical. For us, we also measure the ACV from a deal, the overall initial land value of a deal, and that's how you actually measure strategic versus tactical, right? Because when it's tactical, you have the SE going on a call, here's the drop down, and that's how you check that box, and I'm done. When it's more strategic and you take this role of like, I know the product, I know the market, I can actually help you resolve your pain point in the right way. And for us, we usually see 20 to 30% more when this deal hits the solution consulting, the solution engineer, because hey guys, you came for this pain point, this is awesome, we can help you. But that's the actual way you need to help that. So I think initial land, initial ACV, it's critical.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that, right? I think as SCs, we also need to know the licensing models and what we are actually selling. It's really important, right? A lot of times we do the demos and then we forget what's happened after that. And I think it's really important to understand what your organization is selling, why is it of value, how can you establish that as a bigger, larger deal up front? And a lot of that influence comes from SEs and not directly sales a lot of times.
So back to Gokul, earlier you were talking about knowing the product, understanding your market space, your domain, basically building trust. What are some other things that you and your team members are doing to help build that trust and influence with the buyers?
Yeah, and I think the first thing is to establish and position yourself as an experienced resource when you're talking to a customer. Because if you come across as someone who's joined newly or does not have the experience, it's not going to go well with the customer, right? I think establishing yourself. So even if you didn't have that experience, collect the stories and make it yours. Make sure you're conveying those stories in a powerful manner. That's really important in my opinion. And then being able to talk about the overall strategic goal. What's the ROI that you would get from using the solution over a period of time? Those are all things that I would really consider to be strategic, and what my teams have been doing in the recent past.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think it's the continuous building on top of what we've already established. Tina, I'm curious, what are your thoughts on this?
Absolutely. So I think anything we can do to establish that trust and credibility with the buyer is key. For us, oftentimes it's being able to talk their talk about human resources, talk about payroll, which is what we sell, but essentially sitting on their side of the table with them. But that also goes to meeting them where they are in their buying process, right? So often we look at our sales process and we think, I've gained access, I've done the executive overview, it's time to do an analysis, it's time to do a demo. When in reality, the buyer's like, no, I just need to see this little piece and make sure that you can do this little piece, and then I can move forward with you. So I think one of the ways that we can help establish trust and influence with the buyer is meeting them where they are in their buying process and helping them make sense of the inordinate amount of information that's flying at them. So anything that you can help them do to make sense of it and to move them forward, and to even sometimes help them identify what their true business issues are, is going to help you get that influence and then also close your deal.
No, 100%. Having them understand what those challenges are. Sorry, go ahead, go.
No, and let's get it right. I think it's as SEs, we own the technical sales cycle, right? And that means, maybe it's doing a demo, POC, whatever it is, but the outcome ultimately is a technical win. And that's what we are all striving towards, right? I think that's really important to note. There are a lot of things that goes into that, but beyond the product expertise, it's your industry knowledge and gaining ecosystem knowledge. Those are all things that just establish instant credibility with customers.
Yeah.
I think too, we have, I was thinking of this earlier, we probably see 5 to 10 times more deals than our sales partners see in a year, just because we're not a one-to-one. So we're a one-to-many. So in the pooled model, we see a lot more sales processes than our sales partners go through, which means we see a lot more business issues and we see a lot more similarities from prospect to prospect or client to client. And we can bring those forward to our clients. We can say things like, I was with manufacturer XYZ just last week and they were struggling with ABC. Are you also struggling with that? Can I talk with you about how we can solve that? Because we've got that experience and that knowledge that we can bring to our prospects.
But let's to all this is great, right? We're building the strategic muscle. We're demonstrating the value to our customers, to our internal stakeholders. But the reality is there's still a lot of tactical work in our role and in our function, right? We still have to do, RFP responses. I got to tell you, RFPs is like the biggest hot potato ever. Like every time one comes in, like 50 phone calls. So who's going to own this RFP? And it was like, not me, right? And security questionnaires, especially as many of us are in the cloud space, that tends to be very painful and drags on forever. I'm curious, what's the balance for you all in terms of strategic versus tactical work that you all do, and how do you help your team members prioritize? I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I think that there are a few things. I think the strategic value, first of all, that solution engineer can bring in here, and we're talking a lot about like the sales cycle and the funnel itself and what can be done there. But if you think about those kind of things, the demo, the RFP, all the security questionnaires, they have a large amount about product and about how your buyers and prospects perceive the product, perceive the market. So from that perspective, the impact that solution engineer and the engineers can have on product and the feedback that they get feed product is huge, right? They see those RFPs. Oh, this is a question I've never seen an RFP, and it's been in the last 5 RFPs. What's going on in the market? All of a sudden, you can start feeding your product team. So that's the first part, and I think that's why RFPs are a pain sometimes, but they're a good amount of value, and where solution engineers could be more strategic is how they feed product and how they help with the intake of the product. The other part of this is the ability, the demo. We talked about this, and demo is one thing I think overall, and that's essentially what Walnut is doing and what Walnut is helping solution engineers at the end of the day. Demo, the way it's being perceived today, is just like very tactical and for solution engineers. And it's wrong. It's wrong because it's, hey, I don't want to go and show you all the things that I can do. It's not important for the prospect. That's not why he wants to spend the time with the solution consulting or solution engineer for that matter. He wants to do what Tina actually said before, right? He wants to get an understanding what other companies are doing in the market. So I think that's another part that could be very, very much helpful there.
And Gokul, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, my thoughts, I mean, again, like all RFPs and security questionnaires and all of these are definitely tactical items, right? I've done that many times. I bug the crap out of my CEO my CISO every single day to fill out security questionnaires. I'm sure he's fed up with me asking him so many questions, right? But I think there's a way we could automate certain things, coming up with templatized responses, having a set of common answers that you can provide to a customer, so you don't have to go and answer 200 questions. You already have responses for 250, and maybe there's a delta. That's what you spend your time on, and that removes a lot of your time from focusing on tactical activities.
And you just said something, Gokul, around building relationships with your CISO team, right? And that's just one, CISO is one person in a group, but there are so many other teams that we need to work with, like marketing, product team, support, et cetera. What are your thoughts on just the building of relationships, and how are you helping your team help create that strategy vision with those groups so that they can also empower you to become strategic?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a great question, right? I think as SEs, we talk to a lot of organizations internally, especially if it comes to, roadmap questions or filling out RFPs. But as leaders in the pre-sales organizations, it's really important to set the context of why your team exists and why it's really strategic. And whatever questions you come with is for a reason. We don't go with random questions every day, but when we ask a question, it's a meaningful question, right? And being able to set that context across the organization as leaders is really important. And the second aspect to that is having empower your teams to reach out to the leaders of these different teams. And that way they can reach out and not having to wait for you as a leader every single time there's an issue that pops up. Those are two important things, in my opinion, that you'll have to do as a pre-sales leader.
Yeah,
that's great. Tina, what are your thoughts?
I am back. I'm so sorry. How challenging.
So the question for you around building relationships with other departments to help build that strategic vision together.
Absolutely. And I think, one of my favorite graphs that Pre-Sales Collective put out, I think a little over a year ago, was pre-sales at the center of influence in a company. And it just showed the span of connections that we all have, which is incredibly important. But one of my favorite ways to have that influence or share that strategy is to bring what we do out into the organization. So offer to do a demo to your customer success leader and their team, or implementation or customer support, right? Because they're so trained and focused on what the product does, not necessarily the value of the product. What we can bring them is what the value of their product is. And that can help set strategy, and that can help you be seen as a strategic consultant in your organization. It's also externally going to your industry events. So networking with other folks who are not only doing your job, but also seeing what's available in the industry and being able to offer your expertise in those industry events as well.
Love it. Kind of like the Pre-Sales Collective.
Exactly.
Great plug. I love it. But, I'm curious, Adira, you again, being a sales leader, to think about the SE role and what we are traditionally, boxed into doing. What are some examples that you're seeing that the pre-sales team is doing more to add value to other parts of the business and or other parts of the sales cycle?
Yeah, so I think, well, there are two different things. First of all, it's not from a place of adding just the value, it's actually being active on the sales cycle, right? Deciding what is being shown to the prospect at each one of the steps. And it's super critical. So our head of solution engineers is effectively helping us build a sales cycle. And there is no reason it would be any other way, right? He needs to know what's coming to him and how he can actually amplify it, talking about those initial deal values, talking about those win rates. So that's one aspect of this. I think it's, if your team, a solution engineer team, or you as a solution engineer, if you're not involved at the sales cycle, the sales funnel before you, you'll be bound to do the tactical things, right? Oh, it's there, let's leave it there, we'll come back to it. That's one aspect. The other aspect, solution engineers are very much involved on our product team and our product decisions, right? We have squads in products, and you have solution engineers in each one of those squads. They don't tell anyone, they trust the SEs more than trust the AEs, right? There's a lot of emotion when it comes
We know
to,
that.
yeah. There's a lot of emotion when it comes to an AE. It's like, oh, I lost this deal because of that. And it's not really clear when SEs, by their nature, they're more methodical. They look at things in a very clear way. That's the market. That's why we lost those deals. That's what we need to amplify on the product. So both of those cases are, well, SEs in Walnut has like a seat at the table and are crucial part, and not just activating, but building the process overall.
Yeah, it's funny. We at a previous company I used to work at, we had an opportunity and it was in the healthcare space. And the SE, I don't know, he held it to himself that he knew the deal wasn't going to come through, and it was a multi-million-dollar deal. It was going to make or break the quarter, and it didn't come through. And then everyone's doing this like root cause analysis of why didn't it come through. And the SE's like, well, I kind of already knew. They changed the technical buyer. And I'm like, why didn't you say anything? Like, we could have eliminated that pain. And I think it's super important that, the SE, again, like I talked about earlier, just having that voice, being willing to challenge and participating in different parts of the sales cycle. That's super powerful.
And I think like you mentioned your question, right? Do SEs participate in the forecasting calls? That's really, really important, in my opinion, right? Maybe people have forecasting calls, or they have a deal run through, whatever you call it, right? SEs need to be a part of it, and there needs to be a specific column allocated to, hey, is there a technical win? Who is the technical buyer? Are they aligned? Are they looking for the right solution here? And have the sales and SE team, the leaders align on the same call. And if there's a problem, go and fix it, right? To your point, Marjorie, is like having that multi-million-dollar deal, and you didn't know that the technical buyer changed. That's a critical piece of information right there.
Yeah, 100% agreed. Tina, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, the forecasting question, because I tend to think we are trained to see the obstacles in a sales process so that we can overcome them. But sometimes that leads us to think a deal is not going to happen, where a salesperson is trained to be very optimistic about their sales processes all of the time. And so I tend to see almost all the time there's a bit of a delta between if we think the deal's coming in and if the salesperson thinks the deal is coming in, which maybe that's okay. But I think it's important to discuss the deals and discuss where those roadblocks might be so that we can overcome them, versus just saying, like, hope and pray, right? Or cross your fingers. I do think what I always encourage our consultants to do is to do their homework on any given account. So make sure that you're doing your Google searches, make sure that you're doing your social investigations, make sure that you're learning as much as you can about the particular industry that you're in, have an educated opinion about that opportunity or about that industry, and make sure you're bringing your ideas forward. And I think that not only goes to building a relationship with your sales partner, it also helps you bring your value forward in that deal, because you're pausing to ask meaningful questions, you're bringing solutions to the table, and you're talking about how you can get that win.
That's great. That's super important. I want to ask you all one last question before we go to the Q&A for the audience. And this is my own question. I'm making it up here, so sorry if it's going to it's somewhat aligned to what we talked about. But as you think about the brand of your organizations, if I were to pick up the phone and call someone from outside of the SE org and ask them, what is the brand statement that you would use to define the SE team? And if it's a negative one, how would you work on improving that? I want to hear from all of you. So let's start with you, Tina. What is the brand statement from outside of your org? And if it's negative, how would you improve it?
Oh goodness, that's a great on the spot question. So I will say, just for my very small like the organization that I lead, when I took it over 6 years ago, we did have a negative perception. It was very much it was an us versus them, a salesperson versus the pre-sales person, right? So we were the roadblock. They wanted to win, and we're like, no, 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 you have to follow my process, or I'm not supporting you, right? So the first thing we had to do was work on relationships. So it wasn't a lack of knowledge, it wasn't a lack of demo skills, it wasn't a lack of anything other than, hey, let's go have a cup of coffee together and see each other for the people we are and work on that relationship. So that's where we started. And our aspiration was to be the best business consultant team in the country at ADP, and we achieved that. I think our team got recognized 2 years ago as the best team. So that was really fun. So we were able to change that perception, but it really all started with building relationships and building trust.
Awesome. I love that. Adir, you're the brand statement of the SE team, and if it's negative, how do you go about improving it?
I think we had a fortune. We were a fairly young company, so we had a fortune to build it, I hope, the right way, and it's very positive. Our AEs are working alongside with our SEs and actually look at them as amplifiers for their deals, right? They're bringing them in because they know, hey, we've established a relationship with the prospect and we have the ability to actually win this deal. Now we want to bring in the solution engineer to actually amplify and concrete the win and increase the value of this overall deal. So I think overall we're in a good place. We're building. I hope as we scale as an organization, we can keep this momentum, right? We want to make sure that this is a critical function for us and it's super strategic. And that's why they're part of also of the forecasting calls and the dailies that we have as a sales team.
I love that. And you know what, I was thinking it's here, like the fact that you're in sales and you're on this call talking about this is super important, indicative to how we can help build that brand, that strong brand statement. It truly starts from the top, and it starts with our sales partners as well, helping amplify that and making sure that the value is recognized of what the SE team brings. That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. Gokul, thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really interesting question because again, I'm part of a startup pretty early on, but I've been here for 4 months, I would say. I do think the way we were operating when I joined was more around a support ticket model using Jira, right? And that by itself just shows that you're here to answer questions and not really be in front of customers, right? So I started changing that mindset and then took it more towards a relationship mindset where you align with a specific AE and you have a specific core set of responsibilities and work with that person day in and day out and responsible equally for the deals as a co-pilot for the deal. I think that's changed a lot of the perception within the broader organization and the way they look at SEs. So I think, yeah, for everyone who's doing tactical work, just shift that conversation a little bit and act like a co-pilot. I think your teams would be looked at much differently than it is today.
Yeah, oh, go ahead.
No, I just, because Gokul mentioned something is like talking about Jira tickets. I think, right, this is like for R&D, right? If you want to have the team be part of the actual sales process, move them to Salesforce, have them part of the CRM, have the communication on the CRM. Jira, I'm scared of Jira. I don't know what's going on there, right? So that's
that's what we do. We want to scare you all out of it. So you don't put in the request. I'm just kidding. I think you're right? The joining of the tools, Adir and Gokul, is super important, right? Having a single approach on how you manage your communication, how you manage your customer. I find that teams who, create unique one-off ways to manage their accounts without their AE really understanding, those are the teams that have problems, and you're constantly dealing with escalations. So those are the questions that we had prepared for you. I'm going to open it up to our attendees. We have 2 questions actually in queue, and we'll go through those here. Whoever is open to answering them, feel free to chime in. The first one we get is from Abhishek. He asks us, pre-sales needs to be a generalist as well as a subject matter expert. How should pre-sales enablement process be defined, and who should run the enablement program within the organization as you think about being strategic?
I can take the answer. I think enablement for pre-sales is something that comes directly influenced by our product team and the engineering team, purely from a technical standpoint. There are two ways to look at enablement, right? One is your, how you're presenting, what your soft skill look like. Are you talking about the value, talking about the why every time? And then the second aspect to that is the technical aspects, which comes from the engineering and product team to fill the gaps that you may not be aware of. Especially in a smaller organizations like ours, we directly reach out to those teams and try to set up enablement sessions. We don't have the luxury of having an enablement manager as of today, but I think that's a role of an enablement manager to figure out and put those processes in place where everyone can utilize the resources that are available.
Yeah. Adir or Tina, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, we did something unique at ADP, probably 3 to 5 years ago. I can't remember how long, right? Everything goes in the blink of an eye. But we centralized all of our pre-sales units into one pre-sales unit. So instead of having pre-sales for small business, which reported to small business, pre-sales for mid-business, which reported to mid-business, we brought all of those teams together under one ADP pre-sales organization, which allowed us to think differently about pre-sales enablement. It allowed us to have some economies of scale. It allowed us to think differently about the metrics that we wanted to support for the organization, how we wanted to go to business, how we wanted to do demonstrations, and how we even wanted to, offer product training out as well. So that was a big win for us from a sales enablement strategy. And it also allowed us to put somebody in charge of sales enablement overall. So we could look at different products that are springing up. We could look at things like, using digital sales room, using Omidin, using some of those tools as well to further our pre-sales solutions consulting business.
Thanks. Adir, anything else to add, or I can go to the next question? All right, awesome. I'm going to merge these two questions. One was in the chat and one's in the Q&A, and they're kind of similar. But Patty and Claudia ask something along the lines of your predictions of the future of the SE role, right? If you think about the new buyer profile, the new markets that we're in, just the subscription versus traditional license agreement and how customers are buying, that's one area. And the second is this notion of post-sales, right? Who owns that in this new world as well? How are you all thinking about that in terms of the future of the role that you're in, and how it's going to evolve for the SEs, SAs in the future? Happy for any one of you to pick that up. You're on mute. Go ahead, Tina.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say I can start. I think our role is evolving. Like if we thought it evolved quickly the last 2 to 3 years, I think the next 2 to 3 years are going to have astronomical evolution. We're going to try to figure out where we fit in the buying process. I think we don't have this sales process anymore. We have a buying process like this that we have to fit into. And that's going to cause us to completely evolve. So whether we're getting in earlier in deals, whether we're working on post-sales opportunities to keep them active before they go through implementation, we're going to see a really big flux in what our role does. And we're going to have to be incredibly adaptable to keep our business moving forward for sure.
Cool thoughts.
Yeah, no, right as we speak, I'm trying to get budgets for a customer engineering role, right? A lot of organizations are moving towards customer engineering. As we live in the SaaS world and try to build bigger deals, your initial deals generally are smaller, which is where your pre-sales influence is there a lot of times, but adoption is really important. Right? Being able to consistently be with the customer and try to overcome their challenges on a regular basis, make them feel good about the product, and try and expand is a really important function. And I think that would eventually fall into the SE world, but more from a post-sales perspective.
Yeah, I think it's also. I think it's also, sorry, I think it also depends also on the complexity of the product. If you look at the evolution, not just from the role, right? The evolution of products now, they're trying to be more easy to activate, but then the problems or identify the problem in my organization, actually activate the solution within the product. Even if the UI is super slick and super easy, it's still the same thing, right? So I think that's the evolution. It's like, talk less about the technical piece of it, of how you can do it, or rather what you can achieve with it and how can I help you resolve the problem. So that's why I view this role as holistic overall, right? You have customer success that are there after the buying process that can actually help you be part of the organization, answer questions, support. But when you want to resolve big business challenges with the product you just bought, that's where an SE should come in play, and that's why it should be holistic at the end of the day.
It's this topic, by the way, I mean, we could probably spend hours just on this topic, on just the complexities of where does the role end, where does it continue, why, and different opinions and different passions, I think, stand up. So I'm in the midst of this right now. I'm trying to figure this out myself. So it's, like I said, a very, very interesting topic to me, not topic. I'm not hungry yet. It's almost lunchtime for me. But, you know, I wanted to thank you all. Before we move on to the next portion of this, for the folks that are attending, you know, posted some questions, feel free to chime in a conversation. Like I mentioned, we do have one poll for you that we're going to pop up here as I talk a little bit about our host. And, you know, I'm going to be a little bit on the spot because, you know, we've got a CRO founder here for Walnut, and I'm going to have to talk about them. So, you know, don't judge me too harshly, Adir. All right. So if I can find my screen, here we go. All right, so as I mentioned, I wanted to thank the Walnut team for sponsoring today's conversation and really, you know, helping us think about the demo platform that we're positioning ourselves for and how we're helping our customers with the personalization of the demos that they have. I know many of you probably go through this on a day-to-day basis and trying to customize 50 different demos for different customers, and every time it's like a small tweak. How can you drive this at scale? That's really what Walnut's helping, you know, help solve for all of you, and making sure that you're driving some consistency within your engagements with your customers. And if you think about some of the features that Walnut has, it's about collaboration. It's about having that library accessible to you in a very easy, retrievable fashion. And then at the end of the day, it's through the configurability smoothness through the demo wizard that they have available to them. So thank you again to the Walnut team for sponsoring this call today and this presentation. I talked a little bit about the community. Did I do a good job, Adir? I did good.
I just want to say we're hiring, so let's talk. You know.
Thank you. But wanted to, you know, thank all of you for being a part of this community. Each one of you is what makes this community amazing. I love all the people that I meet, that I talk to. I'm sure all of you are meeting a ton of new people, and these are the chances where we get to learn from one another in a non-competitive fashion, right? I think many times people are like, oh, well, they're competitors, we don't want to talk to them. This is a great way for us to chat, to get to know how people are doing things and really learn best practices from different types of companies. So join us, whether it be on the Slack channel, join on the community pages, join the different webinars that are coming up, and we look forward to seeing you next time. This is going to be the page of events on what's coming up next, and I don't know if I don't actually have a slide on the next actual session, so check out the site and the road show or the world tour. I think that's the name that the team is giving it. Show up in person, meet some of these folks in person. You'll again make new friends and hopefully, you know, learn something new when you're at these events. So thank you all for being a part of it. Again, thanks to our speakers and panelists for joining us today and for such a great conversation and engagement.